Hi, so today we're going to begin with lesson 45 and we're continuing with our reflections today. So we're going to continue with reflecting across the y-axis. So what I want you to do is brainstorm, look at the graph and see what is triangle ABC being reflected over to get triangle A prime, B prime, C prime. Well, if you take a look, ABC you notice is being flipped that way, which is reflecting over our y-axis there. So triangle ABC is being reflected over the y-axis. So what I want you to do now is take a minute to write your coordinates of A, B, and C there, and then the coordinates of A prime, B prime, and C prime. So take a minute, pause this video, and write your coordinates. Okay, then when we look, we have A is -8, 7. B is at -2, 6. C is at -7, 3. Then we have to look at A prime. Well, A prime is at 8, 7. B prime is at 2, 6. And C prime is at 7, 3. So if we look, we have A, which is -8, 7. A prime is 8, 7. B is -2, 6. B prime is 2, 6. C is -7, 3. C prime is 7, 3. Thinking back to yesterday's lesson, do you think you can create a rule for reflecting over the y-axis? Do you notice anything about these coordinates? Well, you should notice here that the -8 becomes an 8. The -2 becomes a +2. The -7 becomes a +7. So similarly to yesterday, we have a negation, but this time we're negating the x. So the rule here is when we reflect over our y-axis, we are going to negate the x. So it's the opposite of what we did yesterday. So xy becomes -x, y there. So let's do one example together. So at the top of our page, I just want to note we're reflecting all of these over the y-axis. So when we reflect over the y-axis, the rule is to negate the x. So we're going to negate the x, and this time we're going to keep the y. So I'm going to write my rule. xy becomes -x, y. So my y always stays the same, but my x is what changes here. So here I have ECMW. I'm going to reflect over my y-axis here. So I'm going to highlight my y-axis. So that means when I flip it over here, it's going to go from quadrant 4 to quadrant 3. So it should be somewhere in that quadrant. When we do this, our rule is to negate the x and keep the y. So I'm gonna highlight all my x's because those are the ones that are changing, and the y's are going to stay the same. So this one's a little tricky because we have 0. The 0 you just keep as 0, and then we keep the y the same, -1. Here my +1 becomes a -1, then I keep my y of -1. My +3 becomes a -3, and I keep the -3. My +1 becomes a -1, and I keep my negative 3. Then we're going to plot our points. So E becomes A at 0, -1. So that's now A. C becomes B at -1, -1. So I'm going to go -1, -1, and we have B. M becomes C at -3, -3. And then W becomes D at -1, -3. Then we're going to draw our figure by connecting. And we have our reflection there. So now you're going to do some practice on your own, reflecting all of them over the y-axis. So we're following this rule the whole entire time today, since we're reflecting over our y-axis for all of these. Okay, so we're going to do some practice here on reflecting over the y-axis.